and when you look at it like a funnel, you got to realize, like, if your applicant, portion goes down, if you're only getting 30 applicants, wow, what do you have to do? What has to be true? You could hope that all 30 of them are perfect and they're all keepers. Well, and that, but hope's generally not a good strategy. So you might have to do something to entice, see why people are falling out of the funnel. Is it your pay rate that is just not right? So do you offer an extra, buck an hour or something like that, or do you raise that? Do you raise some benefits or perks to maybe take that 30?
Hey, we need people. Where are we going to go to get them? And let's just go hire them, right?
Run some ads, get the resumes in, get the applications in, start sorting through it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that's normal.
Call the halls.
Yep, that's
Yep.
normally where we live, because we look at it as that's the everything, right? Because it's the inflow of people. What we tend to find out is not only is that, of course, one of the important pieces, but you have to plan for where you're going to go, how you're going to hire, when you want them to come on board, all those other things. So there's a lot that goes into recruit to hire. We just know this is where everybody tends to go, tends to live.
Building projects requires technical expertise and resources. Building a construction business is about developing and aligning those capabilities with customers. We exist to help contractors build stronger businesses for the next generation. From startup to sustainability, contractors grow through 6 distinct stages. Each stage of growth requires a different leadership focus, strategies, systems, and structure. Our goal is to broadly share information that helps contractors navigate each stage. Any resources discussed are available on our website at dbmteam.com.
So we've already covered stages of contractor growth. We covered the contractor business model, and those were just intros. So today we're going to hit the talent value stream, TVS, and what the objectives are for that. We're going to go back and look at stages of growth, strategies and standards, how those have to go change. Then we're going to back up, look at the talent market and how to go manage that. I think everybody knows we're in a talent shortage. However, they're understanding the underlying reasons of why, understanding when it's going to go happen again, because it will happen again, and what we need to do to mitigate it is a really critical thing for any contractor, really any business. Then I think, Sue, you do this talent value stream. You've done this training multiple times, and so we pulled out, I don't know what, about 25% of the training or so, and have a brief overview here, including how we walk through this roadmap, and develop that roadmap for a contractor. And that roadmap is different at every stage of growth with every different management team. That roadmap looks a little bit different. So, but we're going to touch really on just how to go do that. And then we're going to cover in depth the recruit to hire, phase, since that's really the first, phase that a contractor dives into with the talent value stream, and where a lot of people are struggling. And we're going to talk especially about the different dimensions of talent and how to evaluate talent. It's a messy thing. That's why you went back to school and got your master, or what'd you get, a master's
Organizational psychology. Yep.
Or in organizational psychology. So after three decades or so in leadership, you realized it's all psychology, and you went back and you got your master's in psychology, and now you're getting your PhD in what essentially offboarding and retirement masterpiece type of thing. I would say.
Yeah, it's actually organizational development, which includes offboarding and pre-retirement transitioning. And organizational leadership. So it's one of those pieces. My dissertation is on how construction industries and the leaders in those industries really aren't looking at the back end of the talent value stream, and how we can, when you look at the front end is skinny, right? There's not as many people coming into the industry, which we'll talk about, how we can maybe keep people in the back end longer and lengthen our pipeline by using the knowledge that's already there. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
That's kind of the little OrgDev that we talked about before, and the big OrgDev, and then we can talk about how you definitely raised my bar from a basic operational focused leader to strategy to organizational development, and the full stack. And then resources wise, leadership pipeline, and it really a learning and application guide tied to some of the things we've already covered in the last few episodes. And then coming up next, making effective role transitions, because as you know, really organizational development and career development, this is where you start to go from building projects to building a contractor to building a career and building a life, is making these role transitions that make sense for the company, make sense for where you happen to be in your life. Are you in the middle of raising kids? Are you taking care of aging parents? Where do you happen to be at? And making the right role transitions. That's something as an individual we have to do, and that's something that is a responsibility of a manager to help their team members navigate those transitions. And then much broader at a bigger company level, looking at the whole organization and making sure those role transitions never constrain growth for the company. Right. And then the hard part is within this entire machine going, okay, how do we identify and prioritize the improvements and development of talent, because we're never going to have enough resources to attack every problem. We can't punch list the business like we can a project. So we'll talk through that in the future, and defining job roles more clearly, which is ever evolving. I was just reminded of that yesterday as we were touching it, I think for the third time, with the contractor, just because they've grown. Right. They're top line and bottom line are 3 or 4 times, when where they were a few years ago, and so the job roles look substantially different, and they have to be constantly redefined with additional levels of clarity. So that's what's coming up next. So starting here on one side of it, contractors exist to build projects, and that's delivering projects to the customer. That's the foundation all contractors are built upon. On the other side of it, it's people. At the end of the day, all the fancy equipment, at least in the foreseeable future, is not driving itself and going and building itself. R2D2s aren't out on the project, so it's people that design and build the projects. So the business of building is really largely about aligning, projects and people, and kind of pulling that all together. And I know, Sue, like you always say, it's the manager. There's I think a book called "It's the Manager," but that's primarily the manager's responsibility, right? Is that how you?
Well, that's right. People can function. They function best when the manager knows what it is they need to do. They've got aligned expectations. And they can really just go out and do their job. And that's what a manager is there for, right? They're there to connect the projects and the people, and then connect the people to their role. And it's interesting, right? Because you can see at the bottom of the screen here, right? Delivering projects to a customer is the foundation that all contractors are built upon. But a delighted customer, of course they're delighted when they've got a great project, but they're delighted when that relationship went well as well, right? When the people on the job are knowledge-based, they're relationship-based, they understand what the customer wanted, and the manager let them do the work they need to do. So yeah, it is. The work we do is all about the people that do it.
Yeah, and this is the where the optimum, I guess for a contractor, the optimum point comes along, is really looking at the opportunities you've got, looking at the projects you already have in the pipeline in your backlog, looking at your resources. Right. Most of those resources that are highly constrained today are the people resources, and trying to match those up for the best returns. Right. over the long term. That sounds easy. It's much harder than it seems, but it is also much more valuable. Which brings us to talent value stream, which is really all of the steps to go through there, and these different phases to ensure that talent's never going to be the constraint to your growth. And that's what we're going to talk through over the next hour, 2 hours, however long it takes us to walk through this. I wanted to start though with we throw around the term value stream. Everybody uses it. I think it's the current vocabulary. It's a lean term, I think, going back to about the 70s, but it's been used in different ways all throughout history. That's just what we currently call it. The best definition that I saw, and we talk about a lot with our field productivity, everything, all the work we do there. It's every step that's required to take raw materials and deliver them into the waiting arms of the customer. An example would be, say, turning a pallet of light fixtures into a lighted conference room, and it looks like a flow chart, and there's this beginning stage, and then there's all these decisions, and there's different tasks that have to be done, and eventually the customer walks in there and they say, wow, I love this conference room, and then they sign off on it, on your schedule of values, and you get paid for it. And we talked about that with that's the contractor's primary value stream or project value stream. It really starts with project execution, but then it starts to get expanded all the way out, including a lot of support services, the supporting operations like design and equipment and fabrication and service teams and things like that. It expands out as a contractor grows. So that really is the definition of value stream. And so when we apply that to talent, it's delivering the right talent to the organization, to the operations and the critical supporting operations that they need to continue growing. Is that, did I do okay? I'm describing that, Sue?
No, that was great. That's great because it's interesting, right? Because when we thought about the talent value stream, frankly, it was just a couple of us sitting around going, "There's more to this, right? There's more planning. There's more steps to this." And then looking at the contractor's project value stream, it just made sense, right? There's a place to start, and there's a place to kind of end, and it's cyclical in between. So, yeah, it was kind of a fun light bulb moment when we finally figured out, hey, look, this makes a lot of sense. And it seems like it makes a lot of sense for contractors. So off we went.
Now, the business of building, and this is just a recap and a little bit of additional from last time, as contractors navigate these different stages of growth, which are pretty much tripling of size at each stage, they're delivering more projects to customers each year. They're building larger and more complex projects. Every contractor has been through this to some degree. And then with that, with 1 and 2 comes that they require progressively more support systems, that those supporting operations, a more complex talent value stream. I was reminded of this, yesterday with a client because, we went from 2014 and going, I think we're good with all the people. We just need a little bit of tune up and a little bit of organization. Okay, cool. And then all of a sudden we got into it and we started realizing, like, okay, wow, we need to upgrade our talent a little bit. Not that the existing talent wasn't great and wasn't doing well for where the company was at, but they were going through this stage 3 around 50-ish people up to the stage 4 of 150 people. And they just needed some additional people that had seen that stage of the mountain, including finance and operations and estimating. And so we got there. And now they're at this stage and they're kind of going from stage 4 to stage 5. And so they're now biting off this step of intentionally setting up in that, and you'll get into this in that recruit to hire piece. We've now hired somebody dedicated to that. We've hired an internal recruiter, and just like all new hires, new role coming in, we completely messed up the first hire. We didn't know how to manage the person, all of those things. And we go through and we learn that process, and now it's clicking really, really well. So now we definitely have what I would say is we have a pretty clear path now to stage 5 and just with the market opportunities where the rest of the team's at. So that you really gets down to different project sizes and project types. So for instance, in stage 1, you're probably doing some small, you're working at the mall, a stage 1 contractor with 5 employees, you're doing some residential stuff. You might be working at a strip mall doing some small TI things. You're doing what you can, and that is beautiful work. And then you get up in stage 3, you're building a little bit larger projects. Stage 6 plus, you're getting involved as a hospital is looking at building a whole new campus. You're getting involved very early in the design stages, and you're working at the programming phases, and you're working there. And you might have a superintendent that is on that project that literally retires on that project that may have been out there 15 or 20 years. I know there's a hospital site up here a couple hours from here. A friend of mine, is on that project, and yeah, the superintendent, he's excited. He's like, one more tower and I'm out of here. I'm off to my retirement masterpiece. So with those different, kind of stages of growth and different types of projects, standards change. And why we're talking about standards is because ultimately with the talent value stream, you are hiring people that can go, perform to these standards. And so standards for performance that support these strategies, they also evolve with the stages of growth. And that, I know you're going to talk a lot more about the consistency, but consistent outcomes on projects for the project's employees and owners is really critical. So we're going to touch on like 6 stages of standards. And first one just being subjective judgment. This is where every standard starts, and there is zero wrong with subjective judgment. That is, like Sue, you looking at something I'm doing and saying thumbs up or thumbs down. The only thing that becomes a challenge with that is if you're letting a lot of emotion, say for instance, get into it, and one day I do this thing and it's thumbs up, and the next day I do the same exact thing and you're like thumbs down. The third day I do the same exact thing and you're thumbs up. And if it's feeling that way to me, then that becomes a bit of a problem. But that's really that's where all standards start. So don't feel bad if you have standards that are at that level. The next one is you start to think about metrics, but they're outcome-based metrics. And that's where it all starts, because the outcomes, it's a series of outcomes all put together that creates the project value stream that delivers projects. Then we start to get into procedures. These are very how-to type of documents. These are, keystroke level, standard operating procedures for greasing equipment or whatever it happens to be. But this is how you do these things. And the idea is that if you do these things, it's going to create these outcomes. Then you get in and you start to think about, things don't always work out exactly as planned. So there's these high-low variability ranges and everything. And you get really clear on what those variability ranges are. And then you're not only your measurement, but your management, you're trying to always, compress them down. But I think like you described this one where somebody came to you, I think a vice president or something came to you and wanted 100%, and you're like, 100% is going to cost a lot of money, and it's probably not even possible to attain. Right. So it's totally okay. I mean, I can want 100%, but 100% might cost way more than the cost of redoing 2%. So right? Yeah. That's what you.
Yeah, there's a risk factor that people need to consider, right? If it's 100%, there's a risk of high cost in the case I was talking about, and in another case it could be, hey, is 98% or 97%? What's the risk? What's the financial or reputation risk if it's 97%, right? So a lot of that is, not only understanding the ranges, but the things that go with that as to why that extra 1% or 2% are absolutely necessary, and making the calculation.
Right. Yeah. And so that's just an evolution, because at first, you say like, here's the hard line of this is what I need for an outcome. But then here's these procedures. And I think if I do this, it all works out. Then you start to realize like, okay, there's a cost to adding on the layers of management required to get to say 100%. So maybe 98% is the right variability range. So anyways, these are just evolutions of standards. The next one comes up of realizing that we're not all really doing this alone. So the person that's say greasing the equipment and fueling and lubing the equipment, there has to be, the person behind them that scheduled maybe and dispatched them out to do that. And there has to be the person behind them that ordered all the supplies and the materials to go make sure that they had everything that they needed and all the filters and everything they needed to go service the equipment. And then there's the person behind them that needed to go pay for it so that they kept shipping all those things. And you see where this whole thing's going. There's a person behind them that needed to make sure that they had the cash in the bank to be able to go pay it. And I'm kind of taking it to a ridiculous, but it, as the business grows, you have more and more people, so you have more and more handoffs, and the connections between people grow exponentially. When you have one person, there's 0 handoffs. 2 people, there's 1 handoff. 3 people, there's 3 handoffs. But then once you get to 4 and beyond, it starts to grow exponentially. And that's what you're really managing as you're scaling an organization is the workflow. So it's not only just the procedures, it's what do I have to do and what do I have to deliver to you so that you can do your job? When do I have to deliver it to you? And what's the feedback if it's incorrect? So that becomes our next stage.
Well, and David, one thing, the thing you really know about workflows is you see the connectedness when the crews don't get their checks. right? I mean, they're not coming back if they don't get their check. So you realize very quickly how connected all those things are.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me if you ever want to know who all your friends are, just don't pay your bills for a couple days, and everybody will start
That's
calling
right.
you. Which then gets us kind of to the management and the quality assurance and quality control feedback, and and this is where you start to say, not only do we have the standard on how this thing is supposed to be done and the standard on how I'm supposed to hand it off to somebody else, then there's a standard on how you manage me, ensuring that I'm doing that in the right way consistently each time. And that's a whole nother ballgame. I was reminded of this a couple of weeks ago because we were at a stage where the company was breaking apart the project teams, right? So kind of between around stage 5, where now instead of just going from, oh, it's a project manager, now there's like a cast of 4 or 5 people with very distinct roles on the projects, and they had done a great job of really defining each one of those specific tasks that person had to do and what their responsibilities were. They had the responsibility matrix. It was actually really good. What the one piece that they were missing was, for instance, okay, a project engineer was responsible for ensuring that the production tracking system was accurate every week, which means they have to tie in with the foreman, with the superintendent, with the customer. They got to look at the accounting system, they got to look at change orders, they got to look at all this stuff. So they really have to pull a lot of things together, which gets into the workflow piece of it. What was totally missing, and it was really clear on the responsibility matrix, that the project manager was accountable for it and that the project engineer was directly responsible for it. Great, no problems. And it had all the other roles that were involved in this. So, I mean, it was beautifully laid out. What they hadn't, but they were getting inconsistent outcomes from that process. Matter of fact, what I love about superintendents is they don't mince any words. So the superintendent said, it was something like poop, but more R-rated than poop, right? So what they didn't have was they had defined the accountability for the project manager, but they hadn't defined for the project manager what their operating rhythm was and what their procedure was for how they were supposed to check the project engineer, which is a learning role, how they were supposed to check to ensure that was good. So it was, they gave the responsibility, the accountability, but they didn't give the how. And so then some of the project managers were doing a great job at it, but the ones that were doing a great job at it were primarily just double doing it because they were really good at doing it as project engineers. So they didn't never really taught how to manage. And that is, I'm hoping you talk a lot more about that because you were very, very good at that process, and partly just because of where you came from, where that was a discipline and due to size. So anyways, that's where we are at. Are you ready to dive into the talent value
Ready
stream?
to dive in. Well, it is interesting, right? Because David, you're talking about the PE and the feedback that comes to that PE, and if they're not giving them good feedback and not telling them really what they need to know and how they need to get better, PEs, like all people, are a limited resource. If we are not handling those people, we are going to have a problem keeping them. And every time we lose somebody, we have to turn around and go back to the beginning and we have to track somebody new. We have to build up somebody new. So a lot of this, you'll hear us talk that not just is talent so scarce, it is the talent that you have needs to really be built upon, needs to be retained in a way that is meaningful to them. And you've seen us talk about this before, right? We talk in our triangle language, right? So the first thing in our triangle is where we do work or we get work, right? We go out, we estimate the work. We need estimators for that, right? We need business development people for that. When we get the work, now we have to do the work. We need project managers and PEs and project accountants and supporting people in the background that are going to help us actually build that work. Like David was talking, that connected level where we understand the workflows that happen. Well, all of that takes the talent to produce all of this work. So it's not just bringing in the talent, it's not just attracting the talent, it's building that talent so we can have more knowledge of those people, right? I mean, David, you and I see it all the time where we've lost an employee in an organization that had all of that institutional knowledge, made it really difficult to build the people around them. But we build the talent, and then we've got the kind of the underpinnings that go all around this to keep it together. One is you have to have a way to track your reporting, right? You've got to keep score of what you're doing. You have to have the administration to deal with it. We go and we buy things because we can't build if we're not going to buy some stuff. So we've got to have the cash flow. We've got to have the people that understand what we need. Again, all surrounded by the people that are going to be there. All of this is usually wrapped up in one or two, or as we laugh, maybe three or four or five different technologies that are behind this, which can, one, they're all run by people, but two, they can get very exhausting if they're not managed well by those people, or there's so many pieces of technology. So we do see some of that. But this just goes around and around, right? This is a continuous cycle that, to be sustainable, to sustain that growth, we have to look at all of these pieces of this triangle. But really, it is about building the talent that keeps the rest of the pieces stuck together, right? They're the actual people doing the work in the rest of it. So we can't forget that they actually have to be built just like anything else. And in our opinion, right, the talent value stream is a great way to take a look at it. So we will be, well, I guess let's just go and talk about the basics, David, and we'll see what we'll just start from there. So the basics really are, we move from having to plan what we want to do, right? If you're that stage one, chances are stage one growth is going to be, oh, geez, I need some help, tomorrow. I just got this, this TI job I'm going to do. I better go find somebody. And that's fine. Their planning their talent needs can be perfect for them at that stage. But you start to get up into, again, your stage three, stage four, and we're looking out a little ways further. Stage five, stage six, we may be out, a year or two or five in advance. And we'll talk a little bit more detail. We'll give some examples of that. But it's really about sitting down and actually planning what those needs are. And then once you plan them, where we mostly sit is in going to be our next arrow here, which is the recruit to hire. Everybody lives there. Everybody lives there. I know. I used to do it all the time. I'm sure, David, you did too, right? It's, hey, we need people. Where are we going to go to get them? And let's just go hire them, right?
Run some ads, get the resumes in, get the applications in, start sorting through it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that's normal.
Call the hall.
Yep, that's
Yep.
normally where we live, because we look at it as that's the everything, right? Because it's the inflow of people. What we tend to find out is, not only is that, of course, one of the important pieces, but you have to plan for where you're going to go, how you're going to hire, when you want them to come on board, all those other things. So there's a lot that goes into recruit to hire. We just know this is where everybody tends to live. But how many people have thought about the next step, right? The onboarding. Onboarding is probably just as important as anything else, right? And it's not just day one. It's usually about that first, I was talking to another contractor the other day, and we kind of sketched it out in a training schedule that really their onboarding was about 12 weeks, where we knew who they were going to work with each week, what they were going to learn over the course of 12 weeks. That'd have to move around depending on, how the job was being built and when pay estimates had to be turned in and things like that. Things would be moved around. But they had a really good schedule of what they needed to be trained on, who was going to train them, when they would be, kind of left to their own devices to do that work on their own. But onboarding was critical. And I go back to day one. David, I know I've told you this story, and I'll try to make it as G-rated as I can. But on a job that I was on, it was this poor person was hired day one. Um, Came in, filled out all the paperwork. It was great, not fabulous. There wasn't any red carpet or things like that, but we did on-site drug testing. So this poor person had to go and produce their sample. They're holding it in a little baggie in their hand, and someone is actually walking them through the office, introducing them to people. And I'm like, that is not necessarily good day one onboarding, right? The poor
Which hand did they use to
well,
shake it?
I just said hello and walked by, but onboarding matters. It matters in presentation of the company that we make. It matters in does this person feel like they fit in the culture of this company, right? What does it look
Right.
like? And really, how are we going to help them train into and sit into everything that they're going to need to know, at least in that first 12 weeks, that as we worked with another contractor, and what that's going to look like from there. Do they have a mentorship program? Do they have, ongoing training? What exactly does that look like? But the onboarding is key. And we spend little time. I mean, do they have a desk? Do they have a computer? Anything else? Or are they standing there waiting for those things? So the perceptions are very important. Once you get them on, now comes the hard work. And the hard work is basically their entire career. And their entire career is about how do we retain the people that we have? They're expensive to hire. They gain a lot of knowledge while they're here. How do we keep them here without losing that knowledge, without losing the opportunity of mentorship, all those things? So retention is really, if you look at it, as kind of three pieces of training and development. There's the training. Everybody needs training at every stage they're going to be at. Even the CEO probably needs training on how to how to handle the new iPhone, right? Whatever that might look like. But there's training at every level. There's also then professional development. Is this person loving their life, loving where they are, loving the job that they're doing? And can we continue to train them in the depth of the role that they're in, right? That mastery of that role. How do we get them there if that's where they are? And boy, help us. It would be great to have 90% people like that love their job, show up every day, give it 100%, and can't wait to jump out of bed and come in the next morning. Then there's the leadership development. What does a trajectory look like to get from, doing your work to managing others or managing managers? What does that look like? Providing that trajectory, that leadership training, and seeing who would be good at it, because it's entirely different. uh, As we both know, it's entirely different to move from doing the work yourself to managing others that are doing the work. So that's really where we look at that retention and development. It also includes, succession planning. It includes all sorts of pieces that go with how do you
Right.
keep people engaged? How do you keep them in the workforce, in your workforce, and getting them to be the people they want to be, right? How do you connect them with the projects that are going to make them the happiest, which then, of course, gives you delighted customers? Then we get to the piece that we
Can
tend to,
on
oh,
this?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I loved one of the things that, and we'll get into, is definitions of, because there's so many different conflicting definitions when it comes to talent. And this is one that I absolutely love, how you separated out the difference between training and development. Because a lot of people think, oh, they're synonyms, they're the same. And so I just want to go back to the onboarding. So when you're looking at that onboarding phase, just to be clear, that is from the time that I've kind of accepted the job offer, and really all the things that happened to me from the time I've accepted the job offer, even kind of pre my first day, and all those communications to make me feel good about the
Yeah.
company, prepared. Then there's like the general orientation to the company. Where are the restrooms? Here's my key to the building or truck or what have you. Drug testing. Hopefully, I did get to do it in private. And then you're talking about then the training for instance, if I'm a project manager, I'm coming in, I'm experienced as a project manager, but I need to be trained on your systems and how to do it your way in your company. So training to be able to meet the standards for the role that I'm being hired into. And then your definition on development is then once I'm there, then you're developing me for future roles. And that
Right.
might be lateral roles. That might be for more depth in my particular role, more, technical certifications, things like that. But either way, it's developing me for something that's beyond just meeting the kind of box of the standards as they sit today for the role that I'm in. Is that how
Yeah.
am I understanding?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the training tends to be the technical tactical, right? Those things, just like you said, here's the job role I've been hired to do. I know how to do it with my old company, so let's train me to do it the way that we want to do it here. Let's get all the standards out. Let's make sure that I understand what I'm responsible for, all of those things. Yes, and then development is that depth or trajectory. And everybody laughs because they always think, ah, well, training. I've been trained. Well, there's training all the time. That is, you might go to a new software program. People need to come back and be trained on that. You'll be trained at the level at which you're going to have to use it, right? A project manager is going to use it differently than a project engineer or a project coordinator. But there's still going to be a lot of that, the the systems underpinnings, the standards underpinnings that you're always going to have to be trained on.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Sorry for the interruption.
Yep.
All right, now what's the next phase?
Well, then the next phase is the one that we tend to forget about all the time, right? When people decide to leave, and let's talk, long-term, high expertise employees for sure. When they decide that it might be time to do something else, to leave the organization, the offboarding is a huge opportunity that doesn't have to just be a cliff, right? Most of the time, people say, "Hey, I'm going to retire." There's the gold watch, there's the cake, a set of golf clubs, and off you go. If there were back to kind of that professional development and retention, if we started conversations with people that were going to be retiring and looked at what are the things that you really want to do, what's the difference in this organization you still want to make, and does that difference look like their time commitment? Is it 4 days a week? Is it 6 months a year? Is it 9 months a year? Right? Do they want to take 3 months off and go to Europe every year? What does it look like? Logistically, what does it look like? Administratively, what does a compensation program kind of look like around that? Are they included in benefits or not? But to me, most strategically is when you go in and you've got your strategic plan or you've got your business plan coming up and those things that you want to do, and you consistently have, number kind of 4, 5, and 6 that just never quite make it to the top 3. So they always get pushed aside. Those are beautiful connections between, we go way back to the beginning of this. We go back to here's the people and here's the project. The project can be a special project. And how do you connect the right person to the right project to get something completed for the organization that makes sense to move the organization forward? So an example is worked with a company that they really were having a hard time with that recruit to hire. Where were they going to go get some of these kids out of school for some of these management roles they were hiring? Well, we were talking to them, and they have a special skill set that is the company does. They do work that many people don't do. So they got together with their local college, with several of them actually. They created a short curriculum that was a couple of hours of curriculum. So we had um, basically one of our managers that was going into the classroom, showing them what this specialty work looks like. They were helping the school to get more information on that specialty work. So the kids in the classroom were seeing what this work really looks like. The uh, manager was getting to know these students literally by being in class with them. And then when it came time for those students to start getting internships or jobs, of course, they were talking to their professors about it, who are, the professors knew our managers. The managers already knew who these people were. Suddenly, by having that college program, in this case, doing the work on this college program actually brought more people into the front of their pipeline. And they were able to do it with someone who was getting ready to retire from the company, wanted to step away from some of the work they were doing, thought this would be a fabulous opportunity, did it, part-time for a couple of years. They had a job role for it, and they had a hierarchy as to who they were going to report to. And then they eventually handed it off to, imagine, an alum from that same college. So it did several things, right? It helped to fill in some of those strategic planning number fours that everybody wants to get to, but they never quite rise to the level of immediacy. And went back and helped through planning, helped to fill in that recruit to hire. So most people just don't look at it that way.
Right. Yeah, and offboarding, I mean, and that's a case in retirement. There's also the case that somebody left and just took another job. It could have been a dream job. It could have been that they were frustrated with where the company was at in the moment, but they were still a good, good potential future employee. So staying in touch with them, and that's where you start to see this full cycle come in as companies mature. They're paying a lot more attention to that offboarding piece.
Well, that's right, because they used to call it, or have been calling it, certainly with the baby boomers, the silver tsunami, right? The whole wave of all the baby boomers retiring. And now companies are referring to it as silver mining, right? They're going back and they're looking at the people that have left and said, hey, is there something we could do? Again, that whole professional development. What can we do to help make your life the life you want to lead in the hours that you want to give us? And it's turning out to be a win-win for just about everybody. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and we're only going to touch on that a little bit. But in that offboarding, and there's also the offboarding of, if I'm just really not a good fit for the company at all, and then I'm offboarded, you can, the simple way you could be like, well, Dave sucks, he's gone, we're glad for that. But what we really have to do is put this back into an improvement cycle and go back to, was our planning accurate? Was the, were the job roles, right? Was the workflow, were the standards right? Was our recruit to hire and our selection part? Like, how did I make it that far, right? You're never going to solve for everything. However, you can solve for a lot of them and say, could we have seen these traits earlier?
Right.
Did we just dismiss? Did we lower our standards because we just didn't have enough qualified candidates coming in? So did we lower our standards and let somebody through the door? And so there's a lot to be learned when you're looking at that offboarding piece from all aspects of it, from the retirement side to somebody leaving and moving on to, the non-regrettable, I'm super happy they're gone. All of them have value.
Yeah. Well, and we'll definitely talk more about this when we, in our next series where we talk about role transitions, because really you're offboarding from one role transition to another. So you have to be offboarded off of that one, onboarded to the new one. Someone else has to be onboarded into the one, behind you or the one you're leaving. So this whole cycle is not just about retention, but it's going from offboarding back to onboarding, even internally, right? Moving from one job role to another. So we'll talk about that.
That's a good point. Yeah. So there's the kind of macro cycle at the company level, and then there's the mini cycle, the talent value stream that's within each role.
Right.
So now this gets down to every contractor basically follows these phases to some degree. It's just that we're going to work to put some vocabulary to it and break them down into some more detail, and knowing that as a contractor progresses, they all get more complex. So how's the alignment look? I know when you're talking through this, it's what the stage they're currently at, the trajectory, and current capabilities and capacity. Like, how do you see all of that coming together in terms of defining, I guess, where the talent value stream is at for a given contractor?
Well, that's the thing, right? When we talk about this, the stage one contractor, their talent value stream happens, hey, we need one person. I know a guy, or I know a guy who knows a guy. Get him out here and just let him work until he doesn't want to work anymore. So the talent value stream can be very, very quick in the front and very long in the retention at that stage. So really, the depth of each of these pieces is going to depend on where you are, the number of people that you're going to hire, how far out you're looking, right? Stage 1, 2, 3 is going to look at it completely different than a stage, maybe 3, 4, and certainly than a 5, 6, right? The growth of the person, the growth of the organization, past and present, right, is going to have a lot to do with where you're going to be sitting in this talent value stream, or how quickly you're going to be running the circle. The bigger you get, the longer it takes to run through this whole cycle. And you're probably running the big cycle, again, the big kind of org development. You're running smaller cycles at projects, but this really is going to be very independent, or very dependent on the stage that each of the contractors is at. And then when you look at your capabilities and capacity, what are those, right? What is your capacity? What is the individual's capacity? What is the organization's capacity to bring in more people? Can you be retaining, training, and developing at the same time you're recruiting to hire? Do you have the internal structure to be able to manage those people, and to understand the capabilities of, one, the people you're bringing in, and two, the people that you've already got there? Do they have those same talents to be able to do the training and development? So it's a very complex thought, but really when you work through it, literally one step at a time, you see how quickly you can move through one versus the other. Again, stage 1 versus a stage 6. So there's a lot to
I
look at.
find that on that capacity piece, I was just, it was making me smile because, stress, I mean, when we're near overload, I mean, stress, it narrows our field of vision. I mean, just, you can go there physically or emotionally or whatever, it narrows our field of vision, and everything starts to seem very overwhelming. So, and I was reminded of this really recently as they were talking about training for some roles, kind of this onboarding piece of not the, they have the orientation down, piece really well, where are the bathrooms, drug test, all that, here's your computer. What they were struggling with was the how to bring somebody, how to train and bring somebody up to speed, in the role. And they were struggling because they were, with talent shortage and everything, they're kind of a person down. So, for the team that they need, they're a person down. And so everybody's really, stressed and running. But lack of training and lack of hitting the standards doesn't necessarily make that process better. But then how do you get the training in, and this and that? And so it was nice because we were able to just to sit down and take what they had, which was actually a pretty beautiful list of, 50 or 60 responsibilities that a project manager, between a project manager and a superintendent, what they had a really good responsibility matrix. And it wasn't the best responsibility matrix, but it was at least a list of all of the tasks, and it was specific enough. And then we were able to start breaking that down and getting people to think about the difference between, like, the manager doesn't have to be the one that's training somebody on everything. It's like, who can reasonably train somebody on to do this task? Who can even train them 80% on this task, and you could just do the last 20%? So
Right.
it was just in helping break all of that down, it lowered the stress level, and then the outcomes were actually fantastic, because then they started being able to use that and go to the individuals and talk to them in very specific language, instead of saying generalities like, you need to get better at financially managing your project, which is, like, not really actionable. Instead, we were able to go back to the list of the task and go, okay, there are 5 tasks that are related to the financial management of the project. Which one of these is Joe falling short on?
Right.
Good. Okay, why is he falling short on that? And when you actually go to why, and you have that specific list, it was a lot easier to do, and then they could get back into the training. It was the aha moment. But when you're under stress, you just look at it and go, the projections are wrong, you need to manage your projects better financially.
Yeah.
And which is completely useless feedback. I've received that feedback. It's completely useless. So it's not inaccurate, but it's not helpful. So so now let's talk through the growth and kind of the market opportunity. And this is a different look at in dollars at the growth of a company. So how do you start to see this?
Well, eh, we all know, right? The smaller company, you're doing about $1 million, $3 million. This is really looking at the market opportunity as opposed to dollar count. It's the same kind of concept, right? Where everything is about a tripling of dollar value as opposed to a tripling of head count, where you go from $1 million to 3 million, 10, 30, 100, and then 300 million up. So looking at it in that direction, if we start on basically on the left-hand side, right, you can see on the slide that in the beginning, when you're at that $1 million, things are very simple, which is great because that's what you need, but they tend to be inconsistent, right? David, you talked earlier about the thumbs up, thumbs down. You don't normally always get the same thumbs up for the same process because the same, it's a conversation between two people. It's kind of how I'm feeling at the moment. It works, but it can be very inconsistent. So as we move across, as you move into the larger dollar volumes, the system does get more complex, but it is also significantly more consistent because we have now, just like we were talking, working through those workflows. You go back and you look at the workflow. You go through and see what the next step is. The next step is. You're no longer telling people you just have to be financially better, right? You're actually helping them find some of those capabilities that go with it. And this is where it all does absolutely begin and end, right? All the good, all the bad on a job begins, or in a company begins and ends with talent. And so as you work your way through, uh, depending on where you are, is it $1 million? Is it 10 million bucks? Is it 100 million bucks? But as you continually work through the talent value stream with your planning and through all of the stages that follow planning, you'll see that the profitable growth will follow as you move from the inconsistencies of your current process, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And as you work through more processes, systems, uh, programs, guidelines, that you will become more consistent. And as you get more consistency, your profit growth will follow. So we just see it as the talent value stream continues. It's just used in a much different way. Again, like we were talking, kind of the stages of growth, they're used in a much different way in a $1 million organization than it is in a $30 million organization. All the thoughts are there, but we're applying it in a little bit different manner. So, David, other thoughts on that?
Yeah, just the that profitable growth will follow if you're intentional about developing the talent.
Sure.
And and it looks like a power curve because it's really slow in the beginning. And I was actually thinking about two people that are now at the vice president level in a company, but 5 years ago they were both in like a project engineer roles, and then but because there was such intentional development, we weren't trying to go make sure that the project engineer function on the job was done. We were trying to take all of the project engineers and develop them a really deep, robust set of skills. And so there was a kind of an overinvestment, if you want to say. The investment was in what you would say the development side. We definitely were training and managing to build the projects they were on, but there was intentional development, towards the future. And out of that group, from 5 years ago, I'm trying to think where all of them are at. I know two of them are at a VP of operations level, and each with $100 million span of control. So they went from being project engineers on projects that were 10 to $15 million each, which are, sizable enough projects, but now they're each running $100 million plus of total business. But it's because they were very intentionally developed. Now, with the growth of the company, they were probably over accelerated a little bit into those roles, but they're doing fine because they've learned how, the disciplines of working through the learning curve and everything. And so the growth curve looks exponential, but it starts with investing in the talent. It's not, you can't just check the box and put in your time and then your growth curve looks like this. You have to really invest in the talent because it becomes multipliers. And they are now doing downstream, within their teams, they are doing the same thing that was done to them. They're emulating, that they're over investing in their project engineers and that beginning entry level talent. So yeah, that's the only thing I've got to add to that. So planning example, you touched on this, right? So planning your talent needs at stage one, you're just kind of starting up. Would you say like, I need someone to help me build this job I just got? And I know a person.
Yeah,
I know my cousin Vinny.
I know a guy who knows a guy.
I know a guy who knows a guy. And that's exactly where you should be at that point in time, right? I mean, you started the business because you knew how to build, you had a customer that was willing to go pay you for it, and you knew a few people that you'd worked with before, and that is your talent value stream at that point in time, and that is your planning. And you can't really, do things like over invest in talent, well, because you don't have any money because you just started up. That is the nature of starting up.
Right.
So by the time you progress forward now and you're maybe at stage 4, you're looking at it and you've got really good control of your work in progress schedule. You've got good control of your opportunity pipeline. You're doing projects that are large enough so you have pretty good visibility in the 6 to 12 month time frame looking ahead, just based on the runoff of your project backlog. And so you can look forward and say, all right, we need 3 more PMs this year, and we have 1 project engineer that's ready to go promote. But we still need to bring in 2 outsiders. And so you can start to look at your talent that way, and you are probably just starting to experiment with a little bit better management of outside recruiters, and
Right.
You're still very frustrated with them because it's a frustrating thing to manage if you are not really good at managing
Right.
it. So that's about where you're at stage 4. Now you move up to stage 6 plus, and now you're really looking, and you're using some big words here. So, like, based on our business planning and our market forecast, where we were looking at this market. I mean, that was, yesterday we were going through long-term forecast for market indicators for the 3 markets that the contractor competed in. We have certain known retirements coming up. We have historical turnover rates. We just know that we're going to lose. So it's not a desired thing, but 1 or 2 of our people are going to leave no matter what. So we need an additional 23 project managers in the next 5 years. And then based on our current pipeline of talent, those that have potential and career progression timelines, we will need 20 interns to accept full-time offers for project engineers this year. And then that gets into, that was a yesterday conversation, as the recruiter was going through there and going, okay, this is what we're going to do in 2024 for college recruiting. With 2023 is already, set. This is what we need to up our game to in 2024. And in this company, it's still pretty, management intensive. So the recruiter, though he knows what to go do, he still has to go leverage all of the other managers and get them to go commit their time and everything like that, which I thought was pretty cool, because he's planning ahead, and he's going, okay, guys, and we're in 2023, we're getting into busy season. We're just gonna, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. But when we get into 2024, this is where I want to start committing our resources and our calendars to. So it was perfect. And then additionally, we have to identify at least 20 craft or foremen that are interested in moving into that PE tract over the next 2 years. So because you might be pulling in, depending on the company, pulling in people from several sources, either the college track or the field track, into the PE role. So that's what it looks like at these different stages in planning. And just, I think we talk about it. Remember that every stage is appropriate for the stage of growth. It's only, if you tried to do the stage 6 process when you're at stage 1, you're not going to have a customer tomorrow because you forgot to build the project. and if you're still going hand to mouth at stage 4, you quite simply just need too many people, and so you're just constantly reacting, and it just won't work out. So it's just really important to align, where you're at. Just know where you're at and align it. Thoughts? Anything additional? This was just building upon what you'd already said, or do you want to dive into recruit to hire?
No, I think I think this is a great base, and this, absolutely leads us right into the recruit to hire.
Okay, so here we are. We've got a talent shortage.
We haven't. It's funny, we have a talent shortage in a couple of ways, right? We actually have a shortage and we have an image problem. So, yeah, there's a talent shortage all over the place, right? Well, which is why we have to find new ways, right? We have to find out of the box ways. We have to be ahead of the game to find that talent. And just like this quote says, right? Not just any talent, but the best talent. Because some people, if they don't want to be in construction, that's fine. Let's find the best talent that works for us, and not just finding the person off the street. So
So I pulled some metrics, and these are not. I mean, this is just how brutal things are in the industry,
yeah.
and it's super interesting. Like I remember, when I started in the construction industry, and I went down and I tried to go get into the apprenticeship program. 88, 89 or something. Yeah, I couldn't get in. They just weren't taking any more people. All fold up. We don't have any more room. That, and that's totally different now.
Mhm.
These were some metrics. Just these were actual metrics for craft recruitment, and this is kind of breaking down the recruit to hire process. So there's put in the broad category of sourcing activities, right? There's the social media advertising, job postings, actual outreach, recruiting. There's referrals from people coming in. So there's all these sourcing activities that go on, which you have to define those within your company and for each stage of growth and each type of role. But they needed 50 applicants coming in, and this was craft, and they were going from journeyman through apprentice level. And so 50 applicants coming in, and then they were, managing that and saying what, kind of metrics, what's the cost per applicant, how many hours did we have to invest in it, what were the best sources, where were we getting people from. Out of those 50, 18 of them were kind of good enough to be phone screened, 36%. 6%, six of those, 1/3 of those after the phone screening were still both interested in the job and then came in to be tested. They actually ran through some craft testing, type of things, just to make sure that righty tighty was known, and lefty loosey and all those things, and they could do the work safely and stuff like that. So they'd actually built out a testing center, which we're seeing more and more of. And then out of those six, 4 of them passed that hurdle, and then went to the next stage where they were interviewed by in this case, superintendents. And then out of those 4 that were interviewed, about 2 of them make it through to do the onboarding process. And then once it's great, okay, good, you did good in the test lab, you interviewed good, but then when you actually get out onto the job site and it's 110 degrees or minus 10 degrees or whatever it is, conditions change
Right.
once you're out on the job site, and you're seeing how things really really work. And so only about 1 out of 2 of those were a kind of a keeper after 2 weeks on the job. And that just happened to be the condition. Different markets are going to be different companies are going to have slightly different metrics, but this stack of metrics is not unusual for this. And if you're union, if you're non-union, you are managing this process. If you're non-union, the union is managing this process. But we've also seen lots of times where the union is just simply out of
Right.
people, and so then the contractor has to work with them and take on responsibility for running this process and then organizing people in. So it doesn't matter whether you're union or non-union, and then it is what it is. So anyhow, these are pretty daunting level metrics, like a 50-to-1 ratio, huh?
Well, and I tell you, depending on, this is for craft. When you start looking at others, you're lucky to get 50 applicants. You're probably getting 5 applicants, right? So the rate is better, right? but there's a lot
Yeah.
less of a pool to look at. And you still get down to, maybe onboarding 2 and hoping 1 is a keeper. So
And then the reason it's important, and we're going to switch to looking, this is a micro view
yeah.
of a particular job, a role in a particular company. And when you look at it like a funnel, you got to realize, like, if your applicant, portion goes down, if you're only getting 30 applicants, wow, what do you have to do? What has to be true? You could hope that all 30 of them are perfect and they're all keepers. Well,
Right.
but hope's generally not a good strategy. So you might have to do something to entice, see why people are falling out of the funnel. Is it your pay rate that is just not right? So do you offer an extra, buck an hour or something like that, or do you raise that? Do you raise some benefits or perks to maybe take that 36% on phone screen, take it up to 50%? Or do you lower your standards, or a combination of the two? But there's only a few levers you can pull when your supply is low. There's very few levers that you can go pull, and we'll talk about those. So now macro viewpoint. This gets into the talent shortage piece. So macro viewpoint, first of all, starts with total quantity of people, and total quantity of people that are out there. There is a massive decline in birth rates between 1960 and 1975, like a 25% decline. Went from something like 4.5 million, births per year to like 3.5 million. So it was a massive decline for 15 years, except for summer of 69. So, and I know we've got another one of those coming up. And then you've got to look at some foundational skills. Like, one of the things, like, I grew up in a rural area. Like, I came up through the field from a craft level, but I grew up in a small mountain town where literally there was 3 houses in the little town that I lived in. And we had a party line, phone wise. That's where you pick it up and you can hear all your neighbors. And you're like, oh, sorry. And you hang back up. And, so it was small. So I grew up using tools and cutting myself and doing harm to myself literally since I was 3 or 4 years old. So by the time I got into construction at 15, there was no questions about how to go use tools, how to figure things out, how to cut things, bolt things together, do all of that. Whereas that looks a lot different. So between 1970 and 2020, 38% of the people that were living in those rural areas, like I was, they've migrated to urban areas. And there's no way that you get, like, my daughter does not have any of those. She just didn't have those same experiences. We're not in the woods. We're not cutting down trees to go make fire for ourselves. We have gas. It's like piped into the house, put in by a contractor. So that definitely changes when, kids going into an apprenticeship program today look very, very different than kids going into an apprenticeship program 20 or 30 years ago. Which then also brings you down to, they've got to be interested in construction. So emphasis on vocational tracks in high school started getting pulled away in the 60s as we started, pushing for more managerial type roles, larger companies, computer sciences, things like that. And then there was some changes in the 80s and 90s that dramatically cut shop classes. They cut the funding for shop classes. So, that's kind of the macro view. Well, that's your first 18 to 20 years of life. Now you got 4 to 8 years of, specific technical training and on-the-job experience before you're going to be decent at what you do. So now maybe you're, 22 to 28 years old, or 26 years old. I'm going to have trouble with the math here as I go through these, but so somewhere, by the time I've learned this on-the-job, just technical how to do things, I'm somewhere, I'm probably 22 to 28 years old by that point in time, when I'm really pretty good at that. Then we can start moving into some direct management roles, supervising some people. And it's going to take me some time to build depth of experience at that level. And then if we want to get up into these really super big, large, complex projects, it may take me, 15 years to get a lot of experience as a really good project manager or a superintendent running those jobs, because they have longer cycles, and I've got to get several of them under my belt before I've, I saw this definition of an expert. It was an expert is somebody who has made just about every mistake that could be made in a very narrow field. And so now they know what to go do. And so when we're looking at those superintendents and those project managers and those estimators that kind of go after those really big complex projects, most of them happen to be in their mid 40s or so, just because it simply takes that long to build that depth of experience. Which gets us back to the declining birth rates between 1960 and 1975. So we have this massive gap in the 45 to 65 year olds coming up. It's not just, as baby boomers was the definition before, but it's really this 45 to 65 year old age range. And we have this massive gap that we kind of peaked at in 2015. And it's just a long downhill slide to 2030. So this is not going to get better. And that's then you move up into your areas like functional area management, like who is the head of all field operations or the head of all accounting and finance or the head of all estimating or project management. And that becomes an even smaller group of people that have the desire and the capabilities to be able to do it. Plus it takes experience, and you can have desire and aptitude all you want, but without experience, it doesn't really do any good. And then you're moving up beyond that into those general management roles. So that's where we see, people really, contractors really getting bottlenecked is saying, okay, we just don't have enough, we don't have an ops manager, so it's hard to scale. And because we don't have a really good ops manager, we don't have the ability to really train our PMs and our PEs very well. So anyways, this is kind of the macro viewpoint of the talent shortage that you were talking about earlier. Any words of wisdom on how to navigate this one?
Well, I tell you, the best thing you can do is look at the talent value stream in such a way that how do you maximize each and every piece of the talent value stream, right? If we're doing really good planning and we really understand what our recruit to hire is, and we really look at the offboarding, now you've got, the onboarding and the retention piece that you really have something to work with there. Because just like you said, if the top of the funnel continues to get smaller, we need to find ways to keep people inside our pipeline and not have to just go out and find new people to come into the pipeline. So it's it's bleak, but not insurmountable, right? We just have to look at it in new ways.
Right.
So, but
Yeah, and the good news is it's an industry-wide problem, right? So it's not like there's one contractor that has the
Right.
market cornered on talent and they're all running there. So everybody's dealing with the same thing. So it's a matter of, if you can deal with it 10% better than I can deal with it, you're going to have a competitive advantage. Fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So now let's get into, as you've said, planning the talent value stream, creating this roadmap and knowing that roadmap is always evolving. So how do you start to look at this piece?
Well, when we started looking at this, it's like there's really kind of three pieces that go with the entire, this is the whole thought process of the talent value stream. It's the roadmap of it. So it's no one piece, it's all of these. So one of them is people, right? We need to know who these people are before we go too deep into anything else. We need to understand what the pragmatism is, right? The simple truth. One of our team members, it's great. He was with a client one day and the client's like, well, but I don't want it to be true. And he goes, well, the truth is the truth, whether you want it to be or not, right? So let's be pragmatic about it. And what is just the simple truth that we're trying to get to? And then what does our prioritization look like, right? When we're talking about the alignment plus the return, how are we going to prioritize positions? How are we going to prioritize which piece of the talent value stream we're working at right now? How are we going to prioritize all sorts of things, and what's it going to bring to us as our return? All of that is really under that talent, the roof of talent. So when we look at this, right, so the people, we want to make sure that those people that are involved, that they are in, the talent and market development, that they know, one, the kind of people that we need that are capable and they align with our vision. So it's not just about the people we're bringing in, it's about the people we're asking to go find the people that we're bringing in, right? Are we aligned all internally to what we want and need? And does that person completely and utterly understand what that looks like when we're going out, right? Not just hiring talent, but hiring the best talent. Because I mean, I know I've seen it when they've gone out and it's like, hey, we need to hire 20 people, and they go out and hire 20 people. It's like, did we even talk about what the company, mission or vision is, and are these people going to be a good fit? A boss of mine one time said, hire hard, because that's how you're going to get the right people, at least given the best shot in the door. Then we get to the pragmatic side of it, right? Again, the truth is the truth, not what we want the truth to be. So we need to just look at it. What is the truth? What must be true for this to happen? and how are we going to quantify? What does that value look like? How do we quantify it? Is it sometimes our quantification is going to be in specific numbers of people, or it's going to be in specific years of experience, or it's going to be in uh, specific new markets. There's a lot of quantification that can happen. We just need to make sure that it is appropriate for the value that it's bringing at the situation we're going to use it in, right? So, but the truth, yeah, the truth is the truth, no matter how we want to spin it.
Not what you.
And then really prioritizing, we go back to that, who before what. We need to look at those simple things. What can we be best at? How do we make our money? Um, how do we work at our best? What's going to drive our profit? And then making sure that we're asking the questions, right? Do I and the people around me and the people we're hiring, do we love what we're doing? Because if it's a grind every day, it's not gonna work. If we don't understand what is driving, the just the simple concept behind everything, what's driving our profitability, what's driving our cash flow, where are we best? If we can't align those things in that, the value they're going to return and the priority that they have to be in, then it's not really gonna, people just aren't gonna fit. It's just not gonna work. So there's a lot to think about, a lot to talk about really at management levels before we even dive too far past the planning into the recruit to hire. So that there's a lot of conversation that really can happen around this to see where we want to dive in. And it's gonna be different. Every contractor is going to be different as to how deep they're going to dive, where they're going to dive, and um, we see it all the time.
And then that roadmap changes really
Yeah.
with every stage of growth, different changing market conditions. We expanded geographically and we went into this new area. It changes continually. So this is not a task to be done, right?
Right.
This is a roadmap to make and continue remaking.
Well, that's right. Because if you're growing just enough to keep up with inflation, and you're not necessarily needing a whole lot of new people, the planning stages of this roadmap may be simpler from one year to the next. But David, just like you said, when we move to a new geographic region, we probably need a new manager in that region. We probably need new people in that region. We probably need an office in that region. There's a whole nother stage of planning that has to go with that. Who moves? Who do we hire locally? What are we looking to get out of it in year 1, year 2, year 3? When's it going to be profitable? There's a lot to look at, and how the people are going to fit in there appropriately. So growth has everything to do with where you're going to spend your time and where your roadmap is going to turn next, right? Do you turn left at the Y or right at the Y? Well, we don't know, but we're at the Y, so it's time to talk about it, figure out where we want to go.
So let's give an example of, and this is not prescriptive, but these are just like a starting point on the recruit to hire and the application of this. So we're here at the recruit to hire process. We talked about how challenging the market is. So on the people side,
Yeah. So on the
questions.
people side, first, again, we need to look to make sure that we're asking the right questions. We're doing the due diligence as to what we're trying to do. So some of the questions, really, we have to start with who can qualify to work for us, right? Who's going to work on our team? We need to know what the key qualities are. Is there something that we can kind of pull that thread across the whole company? What does that look like? What are we going to require of everybody in the organization? What are those qualities that we say, you know what, if they don't have this, then they can't work here, right? These are the no compromise qualities at all, right? This uh, some people go we want to call it ethics, we want to call it a lot of things, but in many cases, it's a matter of the no compromise quality is maybe customer first at all costs. It's something to know. You need to know that about the organization. You need to feel that these are the people that that are going to come to work for you. And then, of course, where do you look? Where do you find the people that are going to be the ones that come in? So the planning is for helping the talent manager go and ask the right questions while they're doing the hiring, the recruit to hire planning process. When they go in, this is their goal. This is where they're supposed to be. So
I think this one's interesting where we'll dive more into this. The easy part is making the laundry list of everything that you would want. The hard part is saying, what are the things that absolutely matter, that are most critical? I think in financial analysis, they call it sensitivity analysis. So what are the variables that are going to most predict, high or low levels of
right.
performance? And then what are the nice to haves? Because we're not in this market where we can get 50 perfectly qualified candidates and pick exactly the right one and go for it. We're looking for what's going to fit.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So truth is the truth. I love this one. Yeah.
Well, and,
I have to go work out after this, so I don't like what my watch is going to tell me, so I'm going to leave it at the office.
yeah, well, and this one is very much, about being really honest about it. When you've got somebody out there in the world trying to do some recruiting and some hiring, can they absolutely 100% describe what it is you're looking for each of these direct reports, right? Do you know what the competencies are? Do you know what the quantified outcomes are? Can you absolutely 100% describe that? Because if you can't, I don't know how you can hire people that will then understand it if the hiring manager can't explain that. So there's a lot of knowledge transference that needs to go from, hey, we got a project manager telling this hiring manager this is how it needs to be. We need to make sure that that is absolutely in line with what we want a new hire to know, right? They need to be as informed when they want to come work for a company, and that hiring manager is that conduit, right? They're the conduit between the company and any new hire. And how many times when they say, hey, why is this a great place to work? Well, we better know why it's a great place to work. Is it great because of the culture? Is
Right.
it great because of the opportunity? Is it great? Why is it great? And we have to have really good examples as to why it's great. Is the office in a new upcoming booming city? And is that just one more reason why it's great to work here? But we need to understand every single thing, why it's important, and how this, you know, comes back to our mission and vision, and how they can see how their role, new coming into the company, absolutely connects to where the company looks, where our North Star is, where that mission and vision is. So the better an employee can, one, have quantifiable outcomes, and two, connect to that mission and vision, the more they're going to feel engulfed by that culture and will most likely want to stay. So some great questions we want to start with. And then is there, we talk about an interview guide here. First off, is there an interview guide for every role definition? And if there is, does it have everything is in it? Does it talk about all of the definitions, of every role, and the support that's needed in each of those roles, what that looks like in the company and the departments? So this is all about totally knowing and understanding the organization and what you are looking for. Not the people, but the what. What's the story that you can tell when you're going out there?
So in on this, I want to ask you a definition question. So I hear there's three words that I hear used interchangeably a lot: skill, competency, and capability. And so I think breaking those down into what they are, and I saw the definition I think that I've settled on that I appreciate the progression on, and I'll use an example of running. Is a skill is being able to do something like running is a skill. Like, can you run? My year-old granddaughter can almost run, but she falls down sometimes. My 18-month-year-old one, she can actually run. She's running, and definitely the 4-year-old and the 10-year-old boys can run. Matter of fact, they run all the time, inside the house, outside the house, whatever. And they're coming out to visit in a couple weeks, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But run, so running is the skill, and then competency would be the quantified element of the skill. So for instance, the I think the Army, physical fitness standard is like 2 miles at a 7 minute pace. So it's like, it's defining what competency level am I able to go perform this skill at. So I can't do that. So, though I am going to go run right now, I cannot do that. So I'm not good from a running standpoint. And then a capability, and this gets down into your capabilities have to support your strategies. That's ultimately what customers are paying for and what you need. So, for instance, in the Army, the reason that they run, the reason they do long marches and everything is because they want to have a capability. And I think I saw one of the definitions was they need to be able to move troops into place on foot with everything that they need to do to sustain themselves and fight. And they need to be able to move something like 20 something miles in a day and be prepared to fight. So they go from a skill to all these different competency levels and certifications of those, because what they need is the capability to be able to do this thing over here, which is what they need. So anyways, when we talk about competencies, if it doesn't have a measure to it, including the outcome that you're expecting to be, achieved, probably doesn't matter. Is that fair
No,
enough statement?
that's a fair enough statement, and certainly both sides of the, let's say, the competencies in a role definition, right? Not only the person in the definition, but the person above that definition needs to understand. They need to understand exactly what that means in real words, right? Otherwise, it's hard to figure out what success looks like in the capabilities department if there's not real quantification next to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that that's probably where we see the looseness in it, because people will use things like, oh, you need to be able to negotiate. But like, for instance, there's an experience level in that. This gets down to the competency. Like, you know a lot about labor negotiations, and I watch you. You geek out on it. You're really good at it. You have lots of experience. I am sure that you've gotten your butt kicked before, and I'm sure you've kicked some butt before, and you've got all the scars to go prove it. So getting more specific, saying my ability to negotiate what,
Right.
the grandsons will be negotiating with grandma and grandpa when they get here. That's but I would not send them out to negotiate a change order, nor would I send them, and I wouldn't send the same person to negotiate a change order that I would to negotiate labor relation issue.
Right.
So this is where competencies encouraging to get specific.
Right.
So sorry for the detraction on that.
No. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And then we get into, again, that third pillar being the prioritization, right? When we get back to those simple things of what drives profit and cash flow best, and do I love what I'm doing? So where do you start, right? Where do you start? What's the priority of the recruit to hire when you go across the team? So when you're looking at it, the talent manager may be looking at, well, hey, the prioritization here is I need to talk to 10 colleges to go get some new recruits. It could be that you've got an area manager or division manager that's looking at, hey, I'm not as concerned about new recruits. I am more concerned about this hole that we're going to have with the retirement coming up. We need to fix that. We need to fill that hole. And then looking around and going, okay, let's see where we are on the inside of the organization. Can we fill it from the inside? Do we need to go outside? What do we need to do? But the prioritizations are not always the same when you look across the team. When you get to a stage 1 contractor, it probably is the same. We need somebody to help build this job that we just got. When you start getting into the level 4s, you start getting, or stage 4, the stage 5, stage 6, it is very much the chess match inside. How many do we need from outside? Where do we go to get them? But when do we get them? Because it's more important to look at how we fill the open roles or the soon to be open roles inside the organization. So a lot of that, again, sounds a lot like succession planning, right? What does that priority look like? So
And that's a really hard one. And it's almost like that urgent versus important
yeah,
matrix, right? There are some roles that are extremely urgent. Like if you are out a payroll person, that role needs to get filled like right
yes,
now. But it's not that high leverage of a role. On the other hand, you might be looking for a new vice president of pre-construction, knowing that that's going to take a while, but it's not urgent. You don't have a burning bridge. You just have somebody in that role that's going to be retiring in the near future, and you don't have a clear internal successor.
right.
So there's, yeah, there, and too often you see that very important role get backburnered into the last minute, and finally the person that's going to retire, they're like, okay, I pushed my date a bunch of times. Like, I just saw, an estimator just said, okay, this is the date, it's June 26th, and I'm out.
Yeah. Well,
It's like,
it's cool though, because those companies that are embracing that, and I realize we'll talk a lot about offboarding at another time, but that are really working with that offboarding, they're working with somebody who's already said, "Hey, I'm out in a couple of years." So no new news is happening, right? They're helping
yeah,
you work through a job description. They're helping you ask all of these questions, right? They're helping you say, "Hey, what are the quantifiable outcomes of this job?" Right? Let's be pragmatic about what this job is. They're helping you actually do that. They're probably doing interviews, right? They're probably asking people. They're keeping it in the forefront, and then when it is their time, there can be that uh, less stressful, more even keeled transition of power, knowledge transfer, when the one going out has a lot to say about the next one coming in, and can really help go out on a slide as opposed to off the cliff.
yeah. And you describe the ideal situation, and a lot of times we're so busy on the urgent role
Yeah,
filling that we keep thinking that, Sam, well, Sam already delayed his retirement for a year, he'll probably delay another year and another year, and
that's
so
right.
then we push the important one off. And so, yeah, prioritization is a tough one, because you got to keep the machine running while planning for tomorrow.
That's right.
This is kind of messy. This was just as I was thinking about, talent is so complex and something we don't fully understand. I mean, you've got 2 advanced degrees in psychology, and it's definitely not nearly as hard of a science as, say, the material science of engineering a bridge. Is that a fair enough
Fair
statement?
enough statement.
I mean, we are learning how to define talent. We're learning, the vocabulary. We're
Right,
learning how, which things can change over time, and which things can't be changed over time. We're continually learning that. So, and we really, I would say, we don't have even an idea of how far along we are. We know how long we've been working the problem, and we know the gaps in
right,
it, but we don't know what the end looks like.
right.
So just knowing that talent is far messier than engineering a project. And I know that's one of the struggles for me, is I wish that talent was as easy as building a project. And building a project is hard, I'm not dismissing that, but building people is incredibly hard. So let me do my best to describe, as I was thinking about, different dimensions of talent, and there's no one best dimension, and they're all nuanced. It's how they go together. But even something like a bar of gold, which I'm sure all of us would love, there's a lot of different ways to describe it. If you say, how big is a bar of gold, or how do you describe it? There's size, and then size could come down to, width, length, thickness. Do you use, the imperial system, or do you use the metric system? Is it millimeters or is it inches? There's volume, so how big, there's weight. Weight's probably the one that we all go to, because there's a market value for the weight that we describe, but that market value happens to be, for a bar of gold as of April 2023, is about $64,000. If that were turned into jewelry, the price goes up exponentially, up towards priceless. If it's a survival situation and I happen to be on a desert island all alone, like Castaway or something like that, it pretty much goes down to somewhere to valueless. To, it could also be a burden if I had to carry that thing with me. It's a lot of extra weight. I could carry water, with that same amount of weight. So it, value depends on, and I think especially with talent, when you're looking at a person and what they can do, they might have been very, very successful over here and very, very high value, but in this organization over here, the way the roles are defined, the way the organization is where it's at, they're just not as valuable in
Right.
that. And the reverse can be true. So it's kind of, that's why I settled on the bar of gold. And I came up with, like, kind of 4 things that I was thinking of don't mix up vocabulary, words, and dimensions, like millimeters, centimeters, inches. They're all the same. they're the same dimension of linear distance. They are all different though. They're all slightly different. So don't mix up vocabulary words and dimensions, and really dig in to understand what you really mean by that. So like when your prior slide, when you were talking about competencies, get back to say, okay, but why? Why does that really matter? What is that? How do we measure that? How are we measuring it with our current people? What's the standard? What's above standard? What's below standard? How does that relate to delivering outcomes on our projects or whatever the role happens to be? Knowing, too, like, talent has a lot more dimensions. They're all imprecise measurements. You cannot measure talent nearly as precisely, though you can measure my height and weight. But I'm not going to talk through that one right now. There's lots of overlapping vocabulary words when it comes to talent. Like we just kind of dissected that, skill, the difference between a skill, a competency, and a capability. We talked about the difference between training and development. And by the way, if you look up any of these definitions, you will find a bunch of conflicting,
Right.
Even in those definitions we just gave. So what's important is, when we're working through the talent value stream with clients, or just internally, if you're working through it, define what they mean to you and what they don't mean, and go with that definition. It doesn't, you don't have to worry about the outside world. You just have to know what they mean to you. And then not all dimensions matter equally for a given role or stage of growth. Like, for instance, if I am just trading gold on the open market, I really don't care what shape that gold is in. I just don't. I care about the weight and I care about the purity. And those are the big variables, the 99% variables, if we talk about prioritization, and, how it's shaped doesn't really matter. And knowing, for that, unlike that bar of gold, which if I bury that bar of gold and I dig it up 20 years from now, it's pretty much going to be exactly the same. It doesn't degrade when it's in the ground or anything like that. People and companies both massively change over time. So somebody that was a great fit today and a star A performer may not be a star A performer as the company sits 10 years from now, and vice versa. So anyhow, that's how I was thinking about dimensions of talent and all that. Now you're the one with, that's an electrician's view of that. You're the one with the advanced degrees. How does this sit with you? How do you see it similarly, differently, all that?
Yeah, well, I certainly look at it in a very similar bent, right? Is that there really is no one best dimension. People are messy. They can't necessarily be predicted because there's so many outside forces, right? When people show up for work, they bring their whole selves, whether their morning went great or not. I think what's probably the best thing to pull from here is that realize that just because somebody measures in millimeters or centimeters on one scale, that inches on another scale is totally fine. You may use inches, they may use centimeters. It's not a big deal. Just make sure that if you're inside the same organization and you're having the same conversations, that you have a common language. Language is probably, David, just like you were saying, right? Language is probably where we get messed up the most. We just we think we know what the other one's talking about, and it turns out we do not have a clear and transparent definition that everybody can buy into. So of all the things, and to me, and we'll get to a lot of this next time, is in those role definitions and role transitions, is the clear communication of what you're talking about. So there's no one right answer. There's just a right answer for you and your company, right?
Yeah. So if you're choosing dimensions, like personally, I give my running times in meters, just because it sounds much better to say 10,000 meters rather than to say 6 miles. It just sounds better. That's all. So
I like it. Take the win. Take the
yeah.
win.
And if you give if people are thinking about miles per hour or something like that, and I give the time in kilometers, and it just sounds like I'm so much better than I am. So it is important to dig into, like, okay, what is that? All right. So joking aside, no perfect models or tools, though there are a lot of models. We talked about this before with the contractor business model, that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And there's there's a variety of them, I mean, from Clifton strengths through, DISC, stratified systems theory. There's physical performance, tests. There's a technical hard skill test. There's all kinds of models and tests. You have to know what you're using it for, and make sure that you're using something that is going to go help you either predict the performance of somebody that's moving into a current role, or help you design their development path forward. But it's like, and don't just assume that it's some degree of wrong,
Right.
and that there's multiple dimensions to it. So I think in this, when you're evaluating people, because really if you're in this recruit to hire, you are evaluating people and you're selecting people, and it's really important to know, be clear that you're evaluating a person's fit for your project team and company at a moment in time, and can they meet the performance standards for the role after their onboarding, training, and integration period. That's really what you're trying to do, and possibly looking at them for the future of, do they have the skills, aptitude, and desire for future roles. You're not evaluating them as a person, but also be really sensitive, and I'm talking to myself in this, of how the other person may feel in that relationship, because it is hard if you're going in and you're putting yourself out there and you're saying, I'm applying for this job. Let's face it, that's probably something that they're looking at you and you're evaluating them.
Right.
And so just know that's a dynamic to be sensitive to. It can actually mess up the results. Some people get very, very caught up in it. It can mess up the results, so to speak, of the evaluation.
Right.
So, again, so this is where you have a lot more training, and you geek out over this. I love how you think about talent. So what more do you have to add on this one?
Well, the one ad is full disclosure, Clifton Strengths geek, right? Certified coach, find that stuff incredibly fascinating. And David, you and I were talking about it earlier today, that yes, you're evaluating that person's fit in the organization. Just also remember that every person, based on the Clifton Strengths research, is that you are 1 in 34 million. When you look at the themes that come through Clifton Strengths, the chances of having your strengths in the same order as another person on the planet is 1 in 34 million. So does the hiring manager have a heck of a job to go do? Yes, they do. Because they're not just looking at a bank of people, they're looking at every single individual and how they're going to fit into this organization. Do they have the requisite skills? What does that look like? So it's harder than people think it is.
Yeah, and it doesn't define the whole of a person. It defines a series of dimensions about that person, but it doesn't
Right.
define their hard skills or their experience, or what their desires are, or anything like that. Or else you'd only have like 10 project managers on the planet or something like that. If it was, you had to have this perfect sequence of Clifton strengths in order to be able to do the job. So anyway, it's one, as you get into it, and I would say that the word of caution is when you go to, like, if you go to predictive index training or DISC training, a lot of times those companies, they've grown and they've scaled, and they're very proud of their research and their analysis, and confirmation bias comes in. So it starts to narrow down to where you start to think that this one system defines everything and it can predict all these things. It can't.
Right.
So just know that if you're in there and you start to feel that way, you're some degree of wrong. Back yourself up and look at it, and really get back in, kind of like we were doing with the project management roles, of like, look at the specific task and just say, okay, what does it take to do this task? And really, I mean, a lot of tasks, it doesn't matter if, am I an introvert? Am I an extrovert? Am I strategic? Am I this or that? I mean, most tasks, it just doesn't really matter what you happen to be. Or am I a over C if you use, predictive index, or, a D over I, or, whatever, if it's DISC, just doesn't matter. So, focus on the task, the job that needs to be done, and can they meet the performance standards for the role, and then move on. So this gets into that prioritization aspect, like you were talking about
Yep.
earlier. So let's talk about the end of this. So we got the new budding, up and comer that's coming in, and we got the retired superintendent that's going out.
Yeah.
This is what your whole PhD is in, right?
Yeah, my dissertation is very much about those long-term, high expertise people, leaving the organization or leaving a big role for maybe something different. And really, this is all about taking that retiring employee, looking at what they've got in their head, right? That knowledge that's there, that uh, culture from the organization, and how you move that into a new role in the company, right? How you can offboard that information to others, and how you can also put that person in a new role. So really, it's about when you look at taking someone from one role to the next, right? Depending on the size of the organization that you are, because all of these organizations, right, have these inflection points. What are you going to do? What is the different leadership focus as you move from, the stage 1 organization to a 2, a 3, or from a 5 to a 6? What does that look like? When we're looking at that leadership focus, if we really paid attention to that offboarding, right? You've got that high expertise person, maybe a vice president, maybe a division manager, could be your CEO, right? It could be anybody there. If you're looking at having the conversations with them, what role would they want to do that would be a win for them, a win for the organization? How do you have those conversations? Because what it does is it actually helps the organization in several ways. One is it can smooth that cash flow, because you're not having maybe a high owner that suddenly needs takes a huge amount of cash out of the organization. So there's a way that they can offboard, maybe get their cash back out. Their salary may go down, things like that. So there's all sorts of ways to look at that. But as cash flow changes, you can see that the profit curve, across those inflection points, right? They continue to occur at all of that tripling of headcount. When you've got those offboarding people, they help to smooth that actual growth to something that maybe looks a little more like the ideal. It's never going to get quite there, but it helps to bridge all of those inflection points, because you're not losing that knowledge from, let's say, from a stage 5 to a stage 6 organization. That knowledge isn't walking out the other side of the door. They are, again, maybe setting up programs with colleges for speaker options, getting in the classroom. They could be possibly getting into the legislation, right? Going and being that advocate for new types of legislation to increase work out, into the construction industry. They could be people that are just out there brand building, right? Being the speaker that can be for the organization. So there's a lot of things that can help to kind of smooth that growth when you've got someone who's willing to stay, who's willing to work with others in transferring and retaining that knowledge, that mission, that value, that culture, uh, be that kind of ambassador of the organization. So, David, I don't know if you've been through, I know you've been through several of those. Not sure how long they've gone or things that you've seen differently.
Oh man, we've been through quite a few successions, and there's succession at, I think a lot of people define succession at the ownership level, like, and we define that as very specifically an ownership transition. Like,
Right.
I think for us, we define succession as my ability to transfer the things that I was doing in my role and being able to transfer them to you, and then wherever I'm going, being able to move there. So that's succession. And when you really need to work through that at all levels, that's the organizational
Right.
development aspect that we're talking about. And then there's ownership transition, which is really a financial transaction. So there's two of those things going on at the same time. So
Right.
you have the succession in the role, and then you have the ownership transition. And yeah, I don't think any one of them has been exactly, they all have the same
Yeah.
principles of, like, you've got to transfer transferring the wealth from a transactional standpoint is complex, but it is nowhere near as complex as transferring the skills, the knowledge, the wisdom of how to, and the relationships that were required to actually create that. So that's where the challenge comes from. But that isn't just at the ownership level. That can be at the superintendent level. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest gaps we're seeing, is that how do you build and how do you lead, tens, hundreds, or thousands of people? That's a really big skill to pass on. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, you're right. We've seen that 100 times. We don't have enough time for every one of those stories to go through that. We've seen it good and bad, and I think the bad is usually when I think about it, when I just think about while you're talking, it's when, let's say that I'm exiting and then I'm over here and you've got this great plan for me and you've planned for me to go train and coach these 2 or 3 other people. Like we have a general superintendent right now, and his whole role over the next year is just training 2 other people in the role. And that's it. And he's just flying back and forth between 2 locations, and he's doing some fishing in between, and he's kind of enjoying his retirement masterpiece, and he's training and bringing up those 2 people. The challenge comes in and it comes from both sides, right? So if I'm that superintendent that's doing that, like, that sounded really good on paper, but then when I see these 2 people that I'm training, they're like in the middle of the action, and I love being in the action. I feel like I want to dive into the middle of the action. So that's the problem from let's call it the offboardee.
That's right. That's right.
They want to dive back into the action. And that can be the same as, like, if I progressed up a level in a role, instead of me embracing this role that I'm at, I'm still falling down, and I'm really focused on the role that I was doing before, which really hamstrings whoever my successor was in a lot of ways, and it hamstrings my ability to learn the new role. So there's 10 problems go on there. So that's a problem for them. And then the other problem is, from the external, from like the company's perspective, it's really easy for them to go, we're halfway through the training, it's going really, really well, and we just got this new project over here.
Yeah.
And so instead of going, all right, let's bite the bullet, and we're going to go bring in somebody new or promote somebody a little bit earlier, and we're going to have this superintendent, work on training them. Nope, we pull them right back out and put them right back into the fray. So we shortcut the training on the 2 people that he was working on, and then we put him right back into the fray. And then 6 months or a year goes by, and he realizes why he wanted to retire, to begin with. And
exactly.
So that's where we see a lot of problems. It's the clarity of, it's having the clarity of the plan and really working through that, which I know we spend a lot of time with, and then having the discipline to stick to it even as the conditions change. But also being flexible and knowing sometimes the conditions change and require a change to the plan. Right. So I don't know if that described it well, but yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking through that.
Yeah. Well, and we always laugh that it was, hey, we're training people, developing people, professionally and leadership wise. And the change in the schedule sometimes was, sometimes you just got to take one for the team because things have changed so rapidly and everything else. We will get back. It's more of a detour than a change. But yeah, you're right. Having the discipline to know that you're going to detour, but knowing you're going to pull back and finish what you started. So, yep, huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, well, which brings us probably to, I loved, we were talking the other day as we were going through this, and you said you started to view all these different stages of growth like a tornado. So can you dive further into that? Because I did some math on this, and it was kind of cool, and I was really thinking about it. I love the analogy.
Well, and it's less of the destructive tornado and more of the funnel cloud that it is, right? And to me, it was just an interesting concept to think about, because in the talent value stream, you're going around and around, right? You're planning, you're doing your recruit to hire, you're onboarding, you're doing your retention, your training, your development, your offboarding, and that could be offboarding to an internal position, it could be offboarding to outside the company. But you start with this little spiral, right? This little cyclical journey that you're going on in developing your people. And as the organizations get bigger, right, there's more things that you're doing. So the cycle may take a little longer. The cycle is going to be a little bit bigger. And then as the organization moves up and moves bigger, Now you've got the ready to scale companies who are maybe halfway up the funnel, but they're also seeing that they have the little funnel at the bottom happening at a project level, happening at a regional office level, happening at a new geographic location level or a new market they're going into level. So you start to see where we go from the small pieces of the organization to the bigger pieces of the organization, but it doesn't mean the smaller pieces are left behind. Then you get to the level 6 contractors, and they are now, the big pieces of their talent value stream are getting bigger and bigger to include with planning. It might include, are we going to hire an internal lobbyist? Just way bigger things that are adding lines to their planning. So they're thinking at it at a massive level. Their regional offices are thinking at it as a more kind of their own regional level. The projects are thinking about it at their own level, and you may have all of these talent value streams happening all at the same time. So it's less about the mass destruction that happens with the funnel cloud and more about just what the spiraling as companies get bigger, that it gets bigger at the top, but the bottom does not go away, right? It just doesn't go away. It continues to just get taller and wider at the top.
Yeah, so here's what was kind of interesting as I was thinking about this, because I loved your analogy, and when you said it, I was like, okay, and I did what I do, which is like go do some math on it because I'm an ops person. We'll talk about how you've converted me from an operationally only minded up a few levels, but we'll set that one aside for the minute. So the base of a tornado is about, or the top of the tornado is about 10 times as big as the base of the tornado. The winds at the base of the tornado go, and this varies, but are about twice as fast. They're give or take 200 miles an hour versus the top of the tornado is 100 miles an hour. 100-mile-an-hour wind, still pretty righteous. That you're shutting down a job site for sure. And but what that means with those two variables of like 10 times the size at the top versus the base, and the wind being twice as fast, is that the cycle is it goes around 20 times at the base before it goes around one time at the top. And so then when we think about like our example on the planning, when you're at that field level, you're really thinking forward at max, really 90-ish days, because you got some long lead items, but you were living in the week and in the month. You were living right there. You need people to go build your project right here, right now. And so, but that, now you extend that out, that 1 quarter time horizon, you extend it out 20 times, that 6+, now you're at that 5-year time horizon. So now when you're sitting there talking about, well, this is how many project managers we need, 5 years from now, realize that you have like an operations manager down here at this level near the base of the tornado going, yeah, and that job we just won yesterday, I need a project manager right here, right now, today. Why are you yuckity-yucks talking about this up there on the 6th floor, you idiot? And this gets down to, the floors and the ceilings that you were talking about. And that's where some of the complexity lies, is not understanding that. Like when I'm at that lower, floor, things are moving quicker. I should be focused on that narrow time span. I should be focused on what jobs did I win? What's my current backlog look like over the next 6 months? What project managers do I need in place right now? How am I going to allocate resources and everything? And that's where I'm at. So then the conflict comes when you start hearing this, like, talk about the 5-year college recruitment plan and hiring project engineer. Like, I don't need any green people today. It's making it worse.
Right. That's right.
And so it's this constant tension up and down as you go to grow. And that tension will, really starts to show by the time you get to stage 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it's like, because you're never letting go of the bottom of the tornado. That's always there. We're building project, we're getting people in, and we're managing them. It's just that more and more gets added to the organization as you grow. Yep. So I loved your analogy. It was cool doing the math. So let's wrap up with a couple more things. Coming back to the contractor business model, right, from before, and we talked about this a lot in the last series. So no need to go in any further into that. Important to know that from a leadership standpoint, I think this is the point that we want to touch on right here, is from a leadership standpoint, this is what changes the most. The craft aspect doesn't change. An electrician is an electrician, an operator is an operator, and whether they're working at a company that's got 5 employees or 5,000 employees, that level of work is not necessarily changing that much. It's all of the supporting operations and the management structures around that start to go change pretty dramatically. And so there's a couple good resources. One of them is Marshall Goldsmith, who studied this, and it's like, as you progress through different levels of leadership, the book is appropriately called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." So this is a little bit of the floors and ceilings thing, and we'll come back to that one in a minute. But to kind of wrap this up, in my evolution and development, I'm an ops person. I came up through the field and through the craft and through all of this stack of operational leadership. So, and ultimately the company, the strategic decisions are made at the top of where do we play, how do we win? Those are the strategic choices. Operations, and operations defined as everything from estimating to all the supporting operations, like all operational aspects of the company, including the project management and field management. They're there to build the projects and execute the strategies that are in alignment with those strategies. Organizational development is really ensuring that the talent never constrains operational excellence, and that's the talent value stream. That's what we just talked about. And so interestingly, I was being the ops person. I'm like, it's all about ops. It's about procedures. I can't help myself doing the math. And then you start to back up and look at it. My evolution of learning is like, okay, strategy definitely comes into play, because you can be an operationally excellent horseshoe manufacturer in the time of Henry Ford, and that's not going to work out so good for you. No matter how operationally excellent you are, your business will decline just because the market is changing. So strategy is about choosing the markets where you have the best chance of winning, given the capabilities that you have. So then I'm like, I think by the time, you and I met, what's it been, half dozen years ago now? It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been an awesome journey. And I love that, I've always been heavy in focusing on talent, just in terms of developing talent, like as a manager, it's just how I think about it. And I love that gleam and that look in your eye and everything. And I remember us getting into this little kind of argument about, like, is it operational excellence or is it strategy? What is it? And you kept talking about, it's organizational development. It's all organizational development. And you're like, that's just how I see it. And I'm like, oh, you see it so wrong. I'm like, how am I going to help you? And then I remember that when you finally did the mic drop moment, you're like, who comes up with the strategy? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess if you come up with the wrong strategy, that's a people thing, and therefore it's an organizational development thing. And so that's where I had always been thinking heavily about organizational development as feeding talent to operations so that operations can go, execute the projects in alignment with the strategy. What you introduced, to, and we work a lot on this. This is just my evolution. It's okay. There's really, as companies grow, probably as you're passing stage 5 and getting into stage 6, possibly even at stage 4, if you say exit through an ESOP or something like that, or you're really proactive, you start to put together some semblance of a board and a governance structure, and that board's primary value is heavily on strategic choices and heavily on some broader policies that keep everybody in line, and ultimately keeping the CEO in line, because the CEO is there to operate the business and execute everything. Which then comes to kind of the big org dev of ensuring that the right talent and talent pipelines in place for the board, making the right strategic choices, succession and resiliency in all economic conditions. Because sometimes, like, you can make a choice for efficiency in the short term, and short term being 1 to 3 years, and extract a lot of profit out of the business and a lot of cash out of the business. However, that can leave you less than resilient for future economic storms. And so really, like at stage 6 plus, it's really all about sustainability. Right. And so it's not about optimizing just in the short term. You're not trying to not optimize where you can, but you are trying to balance that out with resiliency for the long term. So So anyway, so thank you, Sue, for my continuing evolution just in my thinking and development. So anything else to say besides you're welcome? Or
Actually, yeah, that was going to be you're welcome. So there you go.
yeah, and I think you have a board meeting right after this, so let's go wrap up the next couple of. This is perfect timing, so let's go wrap up the next couple of things and go with it. We're going to touch this a lot more in the
Right.
future when it comes to governance and the broader organizational development. And just because this is a 6+ type of thing where you're finally going to have that working, it meant you started to work on it probably in between stages 4 and 5. You
Yeah.
had to be thinking about it and working on it. Matter of fact, I've got a meeting later on this morning with a company. It's right in between stage 4 and 5, and the leader is thinking about this aspect right now. We won't be there. We've already talked about it. We won't be there for several years until we even start to get things in place. But the fact that we're thinking about it now, we're in the planning stage. Right. So resource wise, we talked about what won't get you here, or what got you here won't get you there. There's this leadership pipeline model, and again, like all models, it is some degree of wrong. However, it's a great way of helping you look at it, at your organization and the different leadership levels, from level 1 of leading self, level 2 of leading others, level 3 of leader of leaders, and then functional area leadership. And not all of these will be applicable in every contractor within every functional area. So we've got a learning and application guide that helps to tie together some of the concepts we've been talking about. And I think one of the really important concepts as you're looking at this is, a lot of times we focus on those high trajectory leaders, those ones that, that 22-year-old that's already out there running, as a general foreman and running projects, or already, moved into a project management role really, really quick, and they just have it. And we celebrate those. Those are super valuable. Those are what we would call your high trajectory leaders from a leadership growth. However, it's equally important to celebrate and take really great care of your high depth people, your person that is, staying in there at a frontline role, whether that's a craft role or a project accountant role or a project engineer role, and they have developed such great depth in that role, and they've got all these other certifications and maybe cross-trained for a few surrounding roles. They're great at training and developing other people. You can rely on them for just your most complex problems. They're great for escalations. Super important to celebrate those, and those occur at all levels throughout the organization as well. So anything else you got to describe here on this one?
Well, the only thing I'd add is we have to remember those high depth people are probably 70% of our organization, 80% of an organization. And they're what allows people to move from that, line 1 to line 2. And we just have to remember it will collapse if we don't have people who love what they do, wake up running into the office loving what they do every day. It's pretty hard to lead people that aren't there. So we have to remember to celebrate those high depth people. Absolutely.
And we'll talk a lot more about just how to break down the people and evaluations and things as in the future. But we got a few other things to get through first, which brings us to what's next. So effective role transitions is next. We get to go tackle this, and moving throughout the organization, moving from company to company, and in or out, and finally off to the ultimate role transition of your retirement masterpiece. So that one I am really I look forward to every one of these. I'm really looking forward to that. After that, we'll dive into, okay, there's a lot of things. Like the easiest thing you can do, and it's like the easiest thing that a lot of companies do, is go in and evaluate everything that can be done better. But that's not super helpful. It's really easy to evaluate what needs to be done and what all the gaps are and all the best practices and blah, blah, blah. What's really hard to do is saying, okay, given our can-do capabilities and capacity, given our will-dos, our desires and our disciplines, what do we need to go focus on that's going to have the biggest impact on the company? And then I want to tackle with you job role clarity and how that evolves over time. Like at first it's a general job description, like I need a project manager. And then, it evolves over time to, I need a project manager that can do these, 50 tasks, and they're with super clarity. So I want to dive into that one. And that, I think, is where we're going to leave it.
Yeah, I just want to know if I get to wear my Hawaiian shirt and have my little Mai Tai since, when we start talking retirement masterpieces, because I'm part way there. So just let me know if I can come and roll.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. You absolutely can. How about that? Let's do that. I love the fact that you own as many black shirts as I do.
Yeah, well, I own as many black shirts as I do Hawaiian shirts. So, there's work and then there's play. So I kind of have the spectrum.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, fair. All right, bring the Hawaiian shirt. All right. That should be a lot of fun. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. So, yeah, contact us, email us, whatever. Hopefully this was helpful. So, and Sue, have fun with your board meeting. Enjoy herding the cats.
That's exactly what it will be. And yes, please reach out if there's anything we can do. David, as always, fun time laughing, talking, and just working through, one more subject matter with you. So.
All right. Roll transitions in Hawaiian next. Bye.
Building projects requires technical expertise and resources. Building a construction business is about developing and aligning those capabilities with customers. We exist to help contractors build stronger businesses for the next generation. From startup to sustainability, contractors grow through 6 distinct stages. Each stage of growth requires a different leadership focus, strategies, systems, and structure. Our goal is to broadly share information that helps contractors navigate each stage. Any resources discussed are available on our website at dbmteam.com.